We have this thing, and I'm more guilty of this than anybody, but we have this thing where everything has to be perfect. Our images must be pin sharp, the exposure perfectly balanced. No noise, sharp corners only, please. Perfect. Perfection. Depth of field throughout. In the past, I've actually discarded images because they were too soft or I didn't think they were technically perfect enough. And whilst I always strive for these things, technical perfection is actually way down on the list of what really makes an image. There are situations when you can just throw perfection out of the window. It's simply not possible. Detail and sharpness are cast aside, and instead they are replaced with soul, mood, atmosphere, drama, creativity, and really being in the moment. What am I talking about? What am I actually banging on about here? Well, on last Wednesday, I released a video. If you haven't seen it, you can watch it here. That video was me on a photo shoot in Northern Ireland in some very stormy conditions, very challenging, very difficult conditions. And I posted a few images within the video, and I received a comment. And the comment said something along the lines of, it's a shame this image has got water droplets on it. Now, I don't feel bad about this comment in any way, shape or form. I really do welcome all comments and all criticism. So to repeat, thank you so much for engaging on my channel, and it's because of your comments that I'm making this video. So I'm going to show a few images that have technically missed the mark. You know, they are far from perfect. But I'm going to talk to you about why I like them and the situation when shooting them. And maybe you'll see that not everything needs to be perfect. So I'm going to start with this image, which is far from technically perfect. The conditions were very difficult to shoot in, and that's part of its charm. That's why I actually like this image. This wasn't focus stacked, it's not sharp throughout, and it's actually full of flaws, especially the water drops on the image. But this day was something else. Heavy rain showers, strong winds, challenging conditions, and that doesn't actually come across in the video. But I feel it does come across quite well in this image. I think my interpretation of the landscape is captured rather well in this photograph, and it's because of its imperfections. You see, when I shoot landscape images, my primary goal is to make the viewer feel something, either feel like they're there or feel some sort of connection with the landscape, which is why I love YouTube, because you can really tell the story behind the image. But the best images, the best standalone images, are those that tell a story, those that make the viewer feel something. And technically perfect images don't always do this, because if this image had no water droplets on it, you wouldn't know that it was chucking it down with rain. You wouldn't know that it was windy and salty and just really rough, which suits the image, suits the location so well. So for me, those water droplets actually really add to the image, and I have no interest in going in and removing them. I think they help tell a story, and if you were to see this as a large print, I'd like to think that those water droplets would make you feel cold and feel how rough the conditions were on that day. Moving on to another image. This image was photographed the next day on the same trip, and conditions had gotten a lot worse overnight. Now, you may look at this image on screen now and you think it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. Actually, it's way out of focus, well out of focus. And that's because the wind was so strong and the waves so fierce that you couldn't hold your tripod in one position long enough. You would either get blown off balance or you would get wet by a crashing wave. You can see the spray in the background. Look at the spray whipping over the headland at the back there. That spray was whipping right across the beach, and it was impossible to stay in one position long enough. So it was a case of running out, placing your tripod down, very quickly composing the image, and then capturing it. And on this occasion, I missed focus by a mile. I'm gonna go in close and you can see how soft the background is, but it doesn't matter because look at the spray, look at the waves, look at the clouds. It's all there. It's not about seeing every detail. It's about seeing the image as a whole. And I think before sharpness and detail, with this image, you want atmosphere. And again, it goes back to really interpreting the conditions and getting that across in an image. I could have photographed a wave crashing over the headland, but that didn't work as well for me. I wanted the wave to crash and then for the water to recede down the headland and for the wind to whip the rest of the spray over and past that building there, that old stone church. Yeah, so another image full of atmosphere, full of drama that is technically well off the mark. And it's all about getting those feelings across. So this image, again, it's one of my favourites, this. I absolutely love this photograph, really because I know that this photograph doesn't exist elsewhere. Nobody has an image from that viewpoint. That's because that viewpoint is actually from a helicopter. And let me tell you, this image technically is so far off the mark when it comes to landscapes. It's unbelievable. You have no idea how much work I've had to do to this image. To pull it back and rescue it, because this was photographed whilst flying over Lake Mead in Nevada, and I was in a very small helicopter, squashed with my camera on my lap, and this photograph was taken handheld, f4.5, I think, f4, about an 80th of a second, and it was one of those situations where I put the camera on full auto and I just pointed and shot. I just sprayed and prayed because I knew that this image would be gone in seconds, but I was looking at something quite special, quite magical with the sunset and the fact that there was actually a drought at the time. So that white fringing you can see around the lake, that's where the water level should be, but it's actually dropped. But technically the image has no detail. It's very soft, very underexposed, and I had to boost the clarity, boost the exposure, basically just Photoshop the hell out of it. And that's because technically it's way off the mark. But if I'd have tried to get this image technically spot on, I would have missed the image. You know, I had that scene for about 10 seconds and it was gone. So I would have missed this image and I would never have it in my collection. But the image for me is all about the unique perspective and the conditions over Lake Mead. It's not about, is it perfectly sharp, is it perfectly exposed? No, it's none of those things. It's soft, it's noisy as hell, and it's underexposed. And I've brought it back through Lightroom and Photoshop to a usable image, but a usable image full of character in it, and it's unique because of its viewpoint. But what it's not is technically perfect. And this is the last image I'll talk about. I love this image. I mean, look at it. It's striking. It's unusual. It's awful. It's terrible. If this image was in a competition and there was the wrong person judging it, it would get cast aside in a second. It's noisy. It's out of focus. It's got motion blur. There's clipping in the shadows, clipping in the highlights. It's a bloody nightmare, I'll tell you the truth. I was on the back of a snowmobile shooting this handheld. Only the reindeers were only illuminated by the snowmobiles herding them across the Arctic. We were racing at about 20 miles an hour over bumpy, I was like shooting it like this. How, again, it wasn't about getting the image technically perfect. It was about capturing and interpreting that moment. And this is the result. An image which on paper is terrible. It's really noisy because it's shot at super high ISO. It's the whites are blown out. I've burnt out the whites on the snow. The shadows are clipping. The reindeer are not in focus and have motion blur. But none of that matters. None of that matters because what it has is amazing character and atmosphere. And I know I keep saying these things, but these things are really important. And it's about telling that story and capturing that moment. So I'm going to finish with this. Photography is full of contradictions. Shoot sharp images. Shoot soft images. Use a polarizer. don't use a polarizer. Travel, explore, shoot local, develop your own style. Try new things. The truth is, it's all about what happens in the moment. That split second when you press the shutter and capture what's in front of you, or your interpretation of what's in front of you. Don't follow the rules and don't shoot for anybody other than yourself.